Sure.
How do you blow free money? And I want to explain what the banks did here, just so everyone understands just how greedy these people are. So firstly, they got a massive bailout at the top of, I mean, for the last 10 years, they've been basically getting bailouts, but they got a huge influx of money directly when they realized the last time bailouts wouldn't be popular at the beginning of COVID. They sent a huge amount of money to the banks. Then they also sent all of us personal checks so that no one would yell about the fact that they were getting free money.
Right.
I don't even remember the specifics of that bailout, but let's just look at all the other money that went into the system with PPE loans and everything else, and realizing that now the banks were flush with an enormous amount of cash. And so what do they do with that enormous amount of cash? Well, the problem is some of it was just parked back at the Fed with the reverse repo, and they were literally just getting free interest on the money that was handed to them. Some of it they put into long-term treasuries or mortgage-backed securities, which I don't even really understand. Okay. If they then just let that sit, I'm putting this together in my head and I could have this wrong. If they then just let that sit, the interest rate is still free money to them. It's only when they go out and they lend above at basically those deposits that they end up with the shortfall if bonds come down in value. So in other words, if the Fed comes along and they insert, let's just say $1 trillion, or let's keep the money simple. They insert $1 million into JP Morgan Chase and they go, all right, we're going to buy a long-term interest bond at 2%, right? Now, let's just say that the bonds then go up the next year to 4%. So fine, I guess on that bond, they're losing, now $200 a year for every year that they're holding it versus the current coupon rate. But if they didn't then go and lend out that free money to somebody else, they're still making a free, it's not a problem on their books. They're still just making a free 2% every year on the money that was handed to them.
Right.
So what I'm pointing out is the fact, like the greed of these people to have looked at all the money that they had last year, both to say, okay, we need to put this into the bonds and then also, I guess, lend out the money against holding that bond. That's where you just get really stupid and greedy. It's like do one or the other. You know what I mean? You don't have to be like fully marginalized up to the fucking gills and trying to soak every piece of interest rate out of the system you can.
Look, you're absolutely right about that. And so that's exactly right. You cannot overstate how greedy and corrupt and like profoundly short-sighted this whole strategy has been. And there's something about that too where you start to you think about kind of like what's known in economics as time preference,
right?
But which is really the whole essence of civilization. All of civilization can be reduced to like deferring gratification, to having a low time preference. That it's kind of like all of civilization is basically about, from the very beginning, like if you think going from like hunter-gatherer cultures to living in a civilization, it's all about making a decision that we're going to start doing things today for benefits later. Like we're going to start working right now. We won't get the we're going to have to do really hard work that will pay off in 6 months. We're going to have to build things that'll pay off in a year. We're going to have that's what it's all about. And there is some connection to like interest rates and their effect on time preference. Like when you have high interest rates, it incentivizes people to save, so like you save money because you're getting good interest on saving money, and it discourages people from borrowing money. And those are, if you look at them through the lens of time preference, like when you're saving money, you're by like definition, you're foregoing on present consumption for consumption in the future. Like you're like, I will not consume right now so that I'll have more to consume in the future. And when you're borrowing money, you're saying I'm consuming like my future assets right now. And so there's just something, again, just an interesting connection that during these zero rate interest environments, all of these people are like only thinking about, well, what will make us more money this year?
I think this has to be planned. Now, you know why? Because if I'm working at a bank and I'm flush with cash and they go, all right, we're going to buy long-term bonds so that we can see some yield, someone's got to be saying, well, what happens if they raise interest rates? And they go, all right, well, we're the biggest and most sophisticated bank. Why don't we call a Powell before we start making decisions that might disrupt the entire system? And Powell goes either, well, I'm not going to raise interest rates, or you have till here to raise interest rates, or he goes, well, we're not going to raise interest rates. And they go, fine, well, then we can't buy bonds. And then Powell goes, well, the only way I can kind of keep the interest rates low is if there's demand for this, so I need you guys to go out and buy the bonds with all the money I'm handing you. And they go, well, if we do that, what's going to happen when the interest rate goes up and we have to mark these things down? I failed out of finance. I'm not a genius. I did not make a Wall Street career out of this. I'm telling you that this is telegraphed.
But if you were in that room, you could be in the back and just go.
Yeah, I would be asking these questions.
Quick question.
Right.
Like, what
happens? And then you would just stress test. Well, what happens if we had to write down at a 1%, a 2%, a 3%, or a 4%?
It's literally like if you were playing musical chairs and they pulled one of the chair away and like everyone's walking down in a circle and they go, "Don't worry, there's going to be chairs for everyone." And you're like, but I'm pretty sure once this song stops, there's going to be like someone won't have a chair. Like that, doesn't that seem likely? And
so here's what probably happens. They kind of tell these people they got to buy bonds. There's a wink and a nod that when things go to shit, they're going to step in, and the weaker players, I guess, have to follow what the bigger players are doing because they can't be the only ones who aren't. You know, if all the big players are going out and they're buying long-term bonds, I guess you kind of have to do the same. But that's where it gets weird on who gets screwed and who doesn't.
Yeah, I will say this isn't exactly pushing back against what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm just making the point that like, it's like I've known people who are in finance, and like some really successful people in finance, and I remember having conversations with them like at the very beginning of the recession in 2008, but I'm talking about in like 2009, 2010, 2011, like when it was still, we were like living in that, you know, the fallout from all of it. And right around this time, I had really gotten into economics and understanding central banking and all of this stuff. You know, I'd become a libertarian. And so I'd kind of be talking to a lot of these guys and kind of like grilling them about this. Like, wait a minute, what's really going on here? Because I'm pretty sure this is a disaster. And you just don't ever underestimate how insulated people can get in their little worlds, and like especially when their little world comes with a lot of like status and money. Like they're around people who are making like real money and have real status and have this whole culture built up around it. Because I remember like asking some of these guys about like, you know, like what, like they didn't even know what the Federal Reserve was. They just kind of knew it was like the thing that was going to give them the signal. They're just like, oh, well, if the Fed does this, then we know this. And if they do this, then we know that. And I'm like, yeah, but isn't this like a whole crazy system? Like, what's the long-term effect of this and this? And they really, it's almost like they just don't even think about that. Right. They just go, no, dude, like this is capitalism. So like if I'm making money, that means I'm making everyone richer. That means we're good. That means like that is kind of the extent of it. They have this almost like very, I don't know, like what a communist would caricature a capitalist as. Like type of attitude where they're just kind of like, no, like this is capitalism. So like if we're making money, that means everyone's getting richer, you know, like they just really don't. And I think that when there are things in that environment that will make you money this year, there is a tendency to just be like, yeah, dude, but I'm going to be like, everyone's going to be giving me an attaboy because I just got the bottom line up. And that's going to be so, you know what I mean? And like, it is amazing how blind people can get to the long-term like consequences when all of the incentives are pushing them in that direction.